There you go.
Good afternoon. My name is William Ackley. I'm a surveyor here in Northeast Florida. For those of you who have been coming to IIMS meetings, I have spoken for now the last 4 years. Randy asked me to pick up something interesting, and hopefully I won't put you to sleep too much. I know it's late in the day, and here it goes. Finfish aquaculture, a type of farm fishing or fish farming. Where does your fish come from? How do we get from this to this? Well, we could, hang on just a second. We could buy a boat and go out fishing. We could rely on processing ships to bring our catch to shore, but that wouldn't supply the whole world demand. More than 3 billion people around the world rely on seafood as their primary source of protein, and that's almost 40% of the human population. Globally, seafood consumption has been on the rise for over 50 years. Between 1961 and 2016, the average annual increase in world seafood consumption was higher than the increase of the consumption of beef, pork, or even poultry combined. While seafood consumption has increased, global fishing catch, the tonnage of wild fish, finfish, basically wild catches, crustacean, mollusks, and other seafood caught each year has remained relatively static since the late 1980s. In that time, aquaculture production has grown to meet the demand that wild fisheries could not. Aquaculture is now the fastest growing food sector, and as of 2016, provides more than half of the seafood we eat globally. As the human population continues to grow, global demand for seafood will rise. By 2050, total seafood production will need to increase by as much as 70% in order to feed the projected population of 9.7 billion people. That's a lot of people. A significant portion of this increase will likely come from animal protein demanded by the growing middle class. With wild capture fisheries unlikely to meet increasing demand since it's been static since the 80s, aquaculture will play a critical role in feeding the world. What is aquaculture? Farming fish in the oceans by using cages. Similar to this is a spherical cage. As you can see in the bottom, you've got a diver. So it gives you a scale in which you can see what is going on and what kind of fish. There are different cages for different sizes of fish and also different stages of their life. Also, this is another cage. If you see over on the right-hand side, you got 2 divers. So it gives you, again, a good scale of roughly how big these pens are. This is a 110-meter pen. It's 363 foot from across our diameter. A surface pen, most likely in the, and unfortunately I did not take any of the pictures, but this is in the fjords of Norway. Again, another pen. You have a monitoring station on top, and relatively easy to maintain, basically. What countries are engaged in finfish aquaculture? Norway is the world's second largest exporter of fish and seafood, ranking only behind China, and is the leading producer of Atlantic salmon with 1.2 million metric tons of annual production. Norway has publicly announced its intention to increase salmon production from 1 million metric tons to 5 million metric tons by 2050. But most salmon is currently produced in the near shore coastal waters of fjords, and expansion is increasingly limited by coastal acreage and environmental concerns such as fish escapes and sea lice. And everybody's going to ask me, what is a sea lice? There it is. It's attached itself to the fish and it creates issues, and it sometimes kills the fish, which is bad. China's seafood market is the largest in the world. The country's per capita consumption of seafood has increased by 700% since this economy began to open up in 1978. This massive increase can be attributed to urbanization of rising wealth, trends that continue in China today, as its middle class is total population continues to rise. As China's demand for seafood has increased, so has the aquaculture production. According to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, China now produces about 2/3 of the world's farmed seafood, though less than 5% of the total production is made up of marine finfish. And basically what that means is there are fish farming. There's fish farm, which is on the land, and then you have the finfish aquaculture, which is in the ocean. The Chinese government is committed to changing that. In 2016, the Ministry of Agriculture announced a national mariculture demonstration zone construction plan 2017 through 2025, which will build 178 pilot farms and increase China's aquaculture production by 30%, from 47.6 million metric tons to 62.3 metric tons by 2025. Japan is the world's second largest seafood importer, behind the United States, and is also a major producer of both a wildcat and farmed seafood. Excuse me. While most of Japan's finfish farming takes place inland or near shore, at least one company is looking to move offshore. In 2016, Nippon Steel, I'm going to mess these names up, so just laugh to yourself, it doesn't matter. But Nippon Steel and Samuken Engineering Company, which design and install offshore oil and gas platforms, partnered with, I'm not going to try this one, a subsidiary of marine products company, Nusushiya, to build a large-scale offshore aquaculture system for the Atlantic salmon. The prototype has 5 circular pens, each 25 meters or 82.5 feet in diameter, arranged around an 18-meter or 59.4 foot or 4-inch steel tower that holds and dispenses food, and will be located about 2 miles offshore, which is still in development. Panama is currently the world's largest offshore fish farm, finfish producer, because one company, Open Blue, that was founded in 2007 and currently produces 2,000 to 3,000 metric tons of cobia each year. Open Blue is located about 8 miles offshore and utilizes more than 20 I'm sorry, I'm just having problems speaking today. Sea stations, fully enclosed, submersible cages that can be raised and lowered in the water column. Because they can be fully submerged, sea stations are ideal for offshore conditions, where storms and wave energy can't damage the infrastructure. So basically what they're saying is these cages or pens can be lowered to the bottom or to deeper depths, so you don't have to worry about surface water or waves, storms, things of that nature, destroying the fish. because fish are very pliable, and you keep them in a bad storm, they're all going to die, and there goes your product. Open Blue founder originally began production 2 miles offshore from Puerto Rico and operated these successfully for 6 years. U.S. government regulations cap production at 50 metric tons per year. This cap supports other methods of fish production. When Open Blue team tried to expand, they were unable to secure the necessary permits due to complex regulations and a burdensome permitting process that was expensive and slow. They eventually moved the operation to Panama, where the company was able to secure permits for large operation. Mexico has moved to position itself as a leader in offshore finfish aquaculture. Through a licensing process that is friendly to businesses and a government commitment to significant development subsidiaries. Basically, if you want to go into business in Mexico, you have to either have someone locally as part of your company as the 51% shareholder, or someone in the government will sponsor you. Pacifico Aquaculture farm striped bass near an island 4 miles offshore of Ensenada. Earth Ocean farms Tobeta near Las Paz, Campeche farms, and Omega Blue both farm longfin yellowtail offshore La Paz, with others are in development. And that is what the fish looks like. As you can tell, it is a very large, very meaty fish that will feed several families in one sitting. These farms are each using either traditional service nets, pens, or submersible cages, such as Innovasa sea stations, or is aquapod. A round submersible cage manufactured in several sizes that produce between 100 and 500 metric tons. And that's what an aquapod looks like. If we go back to this slide, if you look over on the left-hand side underneath the boat, you're going to notice a single anchor. And that's how these are anchored to the bottom, to the single anchor. This way it can float around with the currents and you don't have to worry about anything binding up on you. The U.S. federal government controls commercial activity in the nation's waters between 3 and 200 miles from shore. While several experimental projects have been successfully permitted and carried out in U.S. federal waters, no commercial offshore finfish production has yet occurred. Why? Well, everybody's pointing their finger at everybody else, and everybody seems like they want a piece of the permitting pie, if you will. You got the Army Corps of Engineers, you got the United States Coast Guard, Department of Agriculture. So you have your federal regulations you have to deal with, you have your state, and then you have your local to deal with. In order to fully permit an offshore farm, a company would need to gain approval of 25 federal, that's 25 federal, state, and local agencies. Government support at each of these levels could help speed up the process. We've got to slim this down if we want to be even competitive in the world. And it doesn't seem like our government wants to do that. And that's as much as I'm going to say with that. Within the United States, states control most commercial activities in their adjacent waters from the shoreline out 3 miles. However, Texas and Florida are exceptions. Each claim the waters out to 9 miles offshore, and that is in the Gulf of Mexico. Finfish are currently farmed in sage waters via nearshore aquaculture in a handful of states, but only one state, Hawaii, has an offshore farm in its waters, Kona. Hawaii is home of the country's only self-identified offshore finfish farm. Each country has control of its exclusive economic zone, the EEZ, which extends from edge of its territorial sea out 200 nautical miles from shore. The U.S. has the world's, which span 3.5 million square miles, 9 million square kilometers, and is 20% larger than the area of all U.S. land combined. This large marine area covers a wide range of conditions and habitats, supporting a diversity of species and valuable fisheries. Not all of these areas is suitable for offshore finfish aquaculture, but the U.S. still has considerable more space to develop than many other countries. A recent study that mapped the global portion of this offshore aquaculture suggests that the U.S. could meet the entire demand, domestic demand, for seafood by developing offshore finfish aquacultures in just 0.01% of its EEZ. Benefits for finfish aquaculture. Well, you know where your location of your catch will be before you even harvest it. There's no large investments like in ships, crew, fuel, food for them, as you would expect in a processing ship. There's no costly bycatches, because what the individual companies do is they normally go out into the wild, they pick up, they fish to catch certain species. They bring the fish back to their hatcheries. They spawn their young, and then they put the young into the cages, and they keep the life cycles going this way. Unlike land-based fish farms, you have no pumps, plumbing, or land purchase, or pools or ponds. There's no hazardous material disposal costs during cultivation or after harvest, because normally you'd have to clean out your ponds because of the fish waste. And you have limited amount of high dollar expenses, simply because the vessels you can purchase, and I'm not ready to go into that, feeding the fish at the finfish aquaculture can be achieved by autonomous barges that can resupply food to the feeding towers automatically without the crew. And you can do everything remotely. And having that eliminates a lot of your manpower that really takes your profits away. So when you raise your fish, you feed your fish in one cage, you then take the cage to the processing plant without it being frozen on the shore, and then it can be processed and shipped out the same day that it's processed. There'll be a time in the near future where there will be no more nets introduced into the ocean's ecosystem by large processing ships and trawlers. Families who have worked the waters and made their livelihood by fishing for decades will soon be on the brink of extinction. Do we have any questions?
Curious where you managed to grab all that stuff from, Bill. Fascinating.
It really was. I was when Randy brought this subject up to me, you know, people talk about jumping down a rabbit hole. I could have gone on for a few more hours just because of this, but I know we're constricted for time, but it is fascinating. And it's amazing how the United States, I understand we have to make sure the Coast Guard approves something because of ship traffic. We have to make sure the EPA understands that what's going to be in that area, because of the amount of fish in a certain area, you're going to have fish waste. Are the currents strong enough to spread it evenly throughout the area? And there are other items that are thought about. That's why it's so, because we are so environmentally friendly, sometimes we're over friendly for what we're doing to the oceans, because we're introducing fish that live in the sea already. Anyway, that's as far as I'm going to go with that.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Bill.
And Mike, Mike, Lloyd.
Hi, Lloyd.
I'd like to follow up on William's conversation. When I was 30 years ago, I was in school, I wrote something on the bluefin tuna fishery and the sustainability of that. One thing that you missed out is the Europeans have already developed this model in Japan for the bluefin tunas. However, the sustainability of the food source to grow these fish is the limiting factor. Because with these floating sea pens, as you're talking about, is that you have to have a food source. And that is the introduction of whether you're using a bycatch of fish that's caught on the overships or the processing vessels, or whether or not you're catching your local resources and taking away from your local primary fishing areas. That is one thing about the sustainability of ocean, because the cobias and tilapias, I mean, North Carolina State has a big program on it. And I looked at fish farming right when I got out of college as a source and using local revenues for crawfish, striped bass, and catfish. So the part that he's talking about, he's exactly right, the sustainability of that. But one thing that we're having to be careful of, and I'll talk about this in just a minute, is that with offshore wind is going to have a detriment on all kinds of fisheries along the eastern seaboard, and how they're proposing, what they're doing, areas of closures. So the actual sustainability along the East Coast is going to be challenging. So I just thought I'd add that in there. But yeah, man, you're right. It's a subject that's hard to talk about unless you live it daily. And I live with these sport fishing guys and trawl boat guys every day.
Thanks, Lloyd. Okay, Bill, brilliant. Thank you very much.